everybody, you've got Kyle from Sit Reps to Steer Co's here. And for this video, which is part of our continuing YouTube series, we're going to be talking about MBA admissions, which, from my experience, is a subject that elicits a lot of apprehension and fear in folks. And it's also one of the most commonly asked questions that I get about going to an MBA program, which makes sense. People want to know, am I going to be able to get in? And it's a logical question to ask because there's a lot of time and effort that goes into these applications. And so you kind of want to see, hey, is this even worth my time? So MBA admissions, what are they and what are they not? If you go to my website here, sitrepsteerco.com/MBA admissions, what you're going to find here is an article that I've written here. And it has a bunch of it does a good outline of the process. It's actually not a particularly long article because the MBA admissions process is, well, it's complicated. It's not overly complicated. And what do I mean by that? For any MBA, really, that's worth its salt that you're going to want to try and go to, the admissions process is pretty standardized, actually. You're going to have some slight variations between some of the different letters of recommendation. There might be some that require more than another, but really, for the most part, you're going to be submitting standardized test scores. You're going to be filling out a couple essays that talk about career goals. Sometimes you've got over a challenge, why you want to go to an MBA, a particular MBA program, how will you use the MBA program, and you also have some letters of recommendation, which is kind of a misnomer now. They're more like letters is a weird word. It's more of like, hey, you're going to fill out a small form that kind of does some both quantitative and qualitative rankings on you as a person. Your recommenders are gonna do this, and then they're gonna submit it, and then you send all that in, right? And in addition with transcripts and everything, and a resume, you're going to send all that in. The admissions committee is going to look at it, and they're going to decide if they're going to want to interview you or not. And then from that interview, right, they're going to decide, even if they want to interview you, which is really a big step, a big hurdle if you're going to be an admitted MBA candidate. And from that decision, right, once you do the interview, you're then going to wait to see if you're going to actually get admitted. So that's kind of like the basic overall process, right, at a very high level. So let's actually dive into that here. So if we go to my website here, what you're going to see is, besides some of my humorous writing, what you're going to see here is basically the requirements. So the first requirement that is the most important requirement for any MBA packet is always going to be the GMAT or the GRE, now the executive assessment for many schools. And the GMAT and the GRE allows schools to compare folks at a point in place, right? So say you have a military officer who's coming out of the service after 8 years, and you have somebody who's been out of undergrad for 3 years, has been working as a consultant, or even something else like a musician of some sort, which I've seen. And so it allows them to basically say, hey, we want to compare these two people side by side and see an example of where they are right now in terms of just kind of like mental horsepower. And it also gives the schools a great way to tout, hey, we have high GMAT scores, or high GRE scores. Really, it's more of the GMAT. That's really the kind of like the headline score that they use. And, it's a way for them to, maintain their ranking or try and climb up the ranking. A very high GMAT score is, going to be correlated with, the schools that have high rankings. It's just the way it is. And it's important to note that no matter what you think, right? Like, and I touched on this in my last video where me and Fighter Jet Cockpit talked about the GMAT scores, right? This isn't like a low GMAT score is not really going to make up for whatever elite experience you think you have, unless it's something like truly extraordinary that you can message to the admissions committee in an effective way. And so you may see people like, hey, I was like special forces or I was a fighter pilot or whatever. Is that going to make up for my, if I have a low GMAT score? And the answer is probably no. And the reason is that they're comparing you against other peers who are in the military, right? And I'll talk about this in a second. So, but if you go to admission, if you go to the class profiles for some of these MBA programs, what you will see is they will tell you their GMAT scores for their admitted class profile, and you'll always see something like, oh, we admitted somebody with like a 610 or a 620. Yeah, that that person maybe might have started their own business. That person might have been an NFL player. That person might have been an Olympic athlete, right? Like something truly extraordinary, like they're rewarding excellence. That's an outlier of some sort. But if you look at the GMAT scores and like the distribution curve, like most of the scores are going to be to the right. Kind of when they kind of say the median and the mean, they're going to be to the right and probably above 700. So really important to nail the GMAT, and you can watch my the GMAT video if you want a more in-depth look at the test. The other part is 2 or more years of full-time work experience. And there's a reason for this, right? So sometimes I'll get DMs from folks and they'll be like, well, should I, just go straight to an MBA program for my undergrad? And this isn't usually the case in the military. This is usually more civilian. But the MBA programs, at least the ones you'd want to go to, generally don't take people who don't have any work experience. You may have some onesies and twosies. I know in my MBA program, we had like 2 people who came straight from undergrad, but they were exceptionally academically qualified. Uh, Very high GMAT scores, very high GPAs, and they were coming from Carnegie Mellon, which is itself a very elite school, especially for the undergrad programs. It's a very tough school to get into. And they had problems actually recruiting because they didn't really have any work experience, right? And when these firms come to recruit at schools, they want to get people who have a little seasoning on them, right? That have some experience in the business world. So MBA programs, almost by definition, really want you to have two or more years of work experience. And it's important for military to understand that that work experience includes your time in service. So you'll have people who will ask me, well, hey, do I need to do I need to go work for a couple of years before I go apply to an MBA program? And then the answer is no, right? MBA programs totally count your military services work experience. It's they think it's very valuable and very relevant, which it is. And I make some jokes about the applicability of work experience out there in the real world, or the military experience out in the real world. But in all good natured, it really does give you a lot of great relevant experience that can be applied immediately for corporate roles. Provided you're willing to listen. So, but it's interesting to see this sort of one reason why MBA programs take this, right, is they want to take some very they require this. They want to take some very well employed and talented people and make them even more really employable and talented, and have them all networked and connected together so they can find ways to collaborate in the business community, which is how business really gets done. So, who can you expect to see in a program like this? You might see, analysts from consulting firms, or whatever title they have. All the firms kind of have different titles. Um, and they may want to take a break. They may be trying to get promoted. Some of them may be coming sponsored to the school and then going back to their firms. You see that. You see investment banking analysts who have are having a mental breakdown and need to leave. That's a joke, right? Most investment banks will have what they'll call like an analyst program, and it'll be like a 2-year program, 2 to 3 year program. It depends, and they'll bring in people from undergrad and they say, hey, you're going to be here for like 2 to 3 years at most. Assuming that, and they assume there's going to be some sort of attrition rate because it's a very difficult job. And the pathways for those folks are, some are going to go to private equity. Some are going to get promoted to associates, which is the typical level that MBAs would come in. And some are going to go to business school, and some are just going to go somewhere else, right? And um, and so the business school thing is actually very powerful if you're an investment banking analyst and you go to an MBA program, because you usually know a lot about how to financially model, which is an extremely valuable skill, and gives you really a lot of great insight into how companies run themselves. Um, but really, it's also a break too, because it is a very tough job. And people are honestly, after 2 years, they're just trying to get out of there alive. They can only handle so many 90-hour work weeks, 90 to 100-hour work weeks, and all nighters, and crazy managing directors. uh, you'll see here, the third one, which applies to probably most of the people who are listening to this video, are former military officers. Generally junior military officers. So you'll see field grades. I've seen lieutenant colonels in MBA programs, right? And you'll also see some junior NCOs as well, which I think is really great. Officers don't have a monopoly on on intellect, for sure. So you'll see this for sure. And actually, something that's really interesting is, I get asked, "Hey, I'm a enlisted person. I've done 2 years of my undergrad. I want to go do an MBA program. How is it possible?" Well, I've seen it. I've seen it done. And what people do is they will go and they'll go like finish out 2 years of their the rest of their undergrad. Maybe they only got to do like another year to finish it out, and then they'll apply to the MBA program while they're in their undergrad, and then go directly to an MBA program, right? Because their military experience counts as work experience. And I think that's really important and critical for uh, those folks to understand. And you also see talented people from other backgrounds, right? I touched on this a little earlier. You'll see musicians or former professional sports players. We had somebody who's my MBA program, somebody who was a professional flute player, or she was a professional musician of some kind, right? Had no really like what you'd consider traditional work experience, but still got into the MBA program, did very well, now works at McKinsey. It's great for her. Is a very nice person. You also have some professional sports players. We had an NFL player in my class. It's pretty cool. And then you'll see a lot of international students as well. From China, India, France, Russia, Taiwan, Japan, all over the place. For the Indians, you'll see a lot of Indians in business school and also in the business world as well. And it's very cutthroat for them to get into some of these really good schools. So they're the people that they get there are extremely talented, and are going to go very far in their career. I think I wrote escaped inmates from corporate America. A lot of people that come out of undergrad, they'll do 2 to 3 years at a place, and much like a lot of junior military officers, those. I'm ready for a change. It's time to do something different, right? And you'll see that. Um, Auditors who realize their entire job is a joke. Being an auditor is an extremely stressful job, especially at the junior level. And you'll see people who kind of do the same thing as bankers and decide that they've had enough. Tech workers, right? Tech workers who are really trying to make a big jump, or try to budget, or try to supplement their background with a more traditional business education. Teach for America or Peace Corps folks. These are that kind of almost fall in the same bucket as military. But they'll decide, hey, this is great. I've done this. I've done this cool kind of like larger thing that's contributing to society. Now I want to go to business school and enter the business community. And a smattering of other professions. It really will surprise you. I saw a guy who's he worked at a steel plant, right? I think he was some sort of junior manager. Um, there's another gentleman who ran a steel or like a scrap yard in Queens, right? So this is important to say. Business schools really do value a broad, diverse set of experiences. And it's one reason why the GMAT and the GRE is so important, because they really do want to gauge your kind of like academic horsepower. So the other thing you have to have are letters of recommendation. And the letters of recommendation, they really freak people out, especially in the military. And I think the reason it freaks them out is because when you in the military, when you want to go do something that's nominative or selective, right? Usually you need some sort of like a letter of recommendation. And people will go to like, depending on the person, they'll go to like the brigade commander or like some sort, or a flag level officer. And that person may not know them from a hole in the wall, right? And so you'll be like I'd like you to write me a letter of recommendation. And what will happen is that as that officer will talk to their, somebody in their chain of command, decide whether or not to do it. But that is not really the way you should go about it in a MBA application. And the reason for that is MBA applications want somebody who knows you very well, right, to write a letter of recommendation, and they don't really value. One they'll say like, hey, they'll, they've joked about, hey, we get letters from like CEOs all the time, but like it doesn't really matter to them because like there's no way this person would be able to actually view your work experience, right? If you weren't working for them, like the only way like a general should be writing you a letter of recommendation is if you're basically his aide de camp and you work with him every day. A business school is more interested in that than just having the highest ranking person possible write you a letter of recommendation. Um, and like I said, these letters of recommendation are kind of a misnomer, right? They're not really letters. They used to be, right? They used to be long letters, but what they really are, what they really are is because business schools want to make it easy for people to apply and get as many people to apply as possible so they can be selective, is they will send this person like a link in an email, and it'll list kind of not kind of, it'll have like, hey, rank this person on a scale of like 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 on like each of these leadership qualities, give like a very short blurb on something that they did, and it'll have like, or kind of like rank them in these qualitative and quantitative factors, right? So as you prep your recommenders for this, you should do that, right? So like, look, this is not going to take as much time as you think. And something that's useful to do is you give them all your OERs or evaluations, you know, kind of write yourself a -1 for your MBA program application saying why, you want to do this, and list things you've done that maybe they're not aware of. But, the point is, right, these are people who should know your work experience, right? So somebody probably in your direct, chain of command or, evals, or somebody you've worked with laterally, right? It could be an officer in another battalion. It could be the same rank. You could have another captain write you as long as you worked with them. Ideally they'd want somebody who's maybe senior than you, so they can kind of give some perspective at where you're at in your career, but not a hard and fast rule. And so, where I've seen this is you see like, hey, battalion commanders, an S3 or an XO, um, company commander, if you're a lieutenant, peers you worked with, like not just like your boys, right? Like somebody who you actually worked with. Though certainly you could have one of your friends write you one if you wanted. It just depends on how well they'd want to sell it. Staff officers in another unit who say you've done some work with. Um, someone who had to deal with you and has something nice to say, and that would sound good to an admissions board. One thing to note, right, is that these schools oftentimes in their background verification checks will follow up with the recommender and ask them essentially, did you write this letter of recommendation? And that's about as far as they'll go into it. But sometimes they will follow up. Yeah. So I talked about this. What this looks like. A short 200 or words less statement on the abilities of the applicant, some kind of very short statement about their ability to lead and influence. They might talk about your weaknesses, right? Like, hey, what's a weakness? School might want to know that. And these rankings, and then random questions about your abilities that you rate from like always observe to never observe. So in many ways, kind of like an OER, really, just like a very short way to gauge people. And it's just another way for schools to rack and stack you in their admissions process. What they'll do is they're going to take these rankings and they'll have a certain weight and they'll apply to them, and they're trying to come up like an overall composite score of everybody, right? Because it's the easiest way to select people. Like I said, elite schools will often hire a background verification service to confirm that in fact your recommender did. And I had this done, Carnegie Mellon. I had to go like sign up with this background verification service, and it took them about 2 months, and they said, hey, you're verified. So be truthful in what you write. because you don't want to be on them questioning whether or not you were truthful in your application. And like I said, it's important to coach your military recommenders. And these are the reasons why. So check these out. What you'll also have to provide, obviously, is official undergraduate and graduate transcripts. And so almost all MBA programs require that you have an undergraduate degree. I think there's a couple that don't, but you would have to have something extraordinary in your background for them to basically overlook that. And this is along the same lines of the GMAT, right? Like maybe you just you graduated high school and you founded like a multi-million-dollar business. That would qualify in their minds. You would meet the mark, right? But most programs require an undergraduate degree, and they definitely, I went to West Point, right? So you'll have a lot of folks who will, maybe overvalue a service academy and their grades, right? So they'll think like a service academy is going to make up for, like any defect. And my response to that is schools definitely do grade you, or do judge you on the quality of the institution, right? So say, West Point versus the University of Phoenix, two very different institutions. But at the end of the day, the schools are taking a holistic look at your application, right? And somebody who didn't come, I've met people, they didn't come from like the best undergraduate schools, but they had good GMATs, good work experience. They got into an MBA program. Um, and I just wouldn't, what you've done in your undergraduate past is something you can't control anymore, right? So you kind of have to like almost isolate that from the application mentally and just say like, hey, like it is what it is, and I'm just going to take my shot. And say you had like a 2.4 at West Point, nothing you can do about it now, right? So just try to make the rest of your application be as strong as possible, and see where the chips fall. You'll look at schools' GPA ranges, right, and they'll talk about, hey, our middle 80% is like 2.8 to 3.5. It's true, right? But also just like don't take as much stock in it. The one thing you can control is the GMAT and your letters of recommendation and your essays. You really should try and focus on that. So it's not like law school, right, or even medical school where you're coming right out of undergrad, and so your undergrad GPA is really, really important. Everybody who's applying generally has some work experience, right? And the schools recognize that you've separated from your undergrad, right? And they're probably a different person, like we all are. Uh, when you're out of your undergrad a few years down the road. So just don't be as wrapped up in the GPAs. I think a lot of people get wrapped up. It just like don't self-select out. I hate to see people self-select out. Same thing with your graduate degrees, or if you have a graduate degree, you're definitely going to have to include that. What you don't want to do is, not include something. You should include everything, like always, because if the schools do a background verification check on you and they find that you didn't include like an undergraduate degree or like a graduate degree for some reason, like they're going to wonder why, especially when they say for you to include all your education. You're going to need to get official certified transcripts sent to the admissions committee. All undergraduate schools have a process for this because it is a common request to send certified transcripts to uh, to employers, to schools, to whoever, right? To say, hey, like what, like send us the transcripts and like let it be known what it's going to come from the school. But in lieu of that, right, because they recognize that that's a hurdle, what they will have you do is upload unofficial transcripts to their application portal, and you'll upload those transcripts, and and then the school will say, hey, if we, and they'll admit you based off those transcripts, right? And they'll say, okay, now send us the certified transcripts. So don't lie because they'll find out. Yeah, so do not make up your grades. They don't really care about, for for the military folks, they don't really care about any of your PME, right? So like your BOLIC, your Captain's Career Course, your CGSC, they don't care about any of that. They don't. Honestly, doesn't matter to them because they don't know what the hell it is. Like, yeah. So the other thing you're going to have to upload is a resume, and for a lot of military folks, this will be their first encounter with one, simply because the military doesn't really require resumes. Uh, so they're very interested in your work experience, right? They want to see some progression. They want to see, you've done interesting stuff at work. So either they're going to have you take your resume and upload it, and in addition to uploading your resume, they're going to want you to basically upload short descriptions of your work experience to the admissions portal. And it's a pain, but it's something you got to do. And you also encounter this with jobs as well, which is really dumb. And what's interesting about resumes, and I get this question a lot, is people, a resume is extremely important, but it's important in ways that maybe you don't understand. Schools almost universally, you know, don't really get military experience. And the reason they don't get it is because the military is like 40,000 different jobs in it. And all those jobs have different career progressions. And so it's tough for a school which has rotating admission committees members. It doesn't always have the background knowledge to fully decipher military resumes to really understand career progression in a way that would make sense to somebody in your career field, if you, as a military officer and enlisted person. So you kind of have to like go on your own and come up with the best resume that you can. Now I have some resume sections here. Ooh, that link's broken. I'm just gonna have to fix that. And I've got all these bullet points here, right? And you could say like, hey, enabled communication with local officials, leading to more effective execution of training program during which 200 host nation soldiers were trained in U.S. military doctrine. That's a way of communicating something that's quantitative and qualitative in your resume to an admissions committee member, and they would really like that. Rated as leaders of leaders and top 10% of organization by senior rater. That's a good one. What you don't want to do is just like take your OER bullets or fit rep or whatever whatever your eval is called, and just like put them on your resume. Like it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't help people. They don't get it, and they won't be able to read it. And what you also don't want to do is you don't want to just go like line by line by each job that you've had. You want to try and like craft it, right? You want to massage it, right? So you say, hey, I was at this base. When I was at this base, I did like, you have like 4 different bullet points, and you like covered this time period, or I was at this unit, right? Because just saying like, oh, I was a platoon leader, and then I was like a, assistant S3, and then I was an X, whatever. Like people just don't understand that in the same way that you think they would, right? So you really do have to take your resume and try and craft a story around it. And it's more of an art than a science. And so what I would recommend is, you can reach out to the veterans clubs at the school, and I'll go over this in the other video, in the rest of the video, and have them look over resumes and give you, hey, this looks good, this doesn't look good. Be very polite, and they'll be more than happy to help you because they want to see veterans in there. Things I wouldn't put in there. Most military officers are not senior executives or vice presidents or directors. I see that sometimes. And the reason they're not is because those are actually pretty senior. In the corporate world, those are fairly senior positions, right? At least in the non-professional services world. But like a vice president at a company at a normal company, not a professional services company like a consulting firm or investment bank, is a really big deal. And it's a really senior person who's been doing it for a while. So for you to put vice president on your resume is almost inappropriate, because by definition, you would like be overqualified for going to an MBA program. You should be applying to an executive MBA program. So, a lot of officers are really just kind of like middle management or bureaucrats at a certain level. So I don't know, like I would almost like use like your actual, you try to just be more like, hey, I was, you could say, hey, I was a platoon leader, right? If it was like a really discrete portion of time, um, and you weren't trying to condense it down like I mentioned earlier. Or you can say as an operations officer and, kind of take like, whatever, like 3 different positions and bucket it under that. Like say you're like the assistant S4 and you're the co-ops guy and the food, like you just say like as an operations officer, like that, the school will understand that more easily than saying if you're an S4. So just keep that in mind as well. But what's going to happen if you get admitted? The school's going to take your resume and they're going to run it through their resume process anyway, and kind of get it to what they want it to look like. Your resume should be simple and easy to read. Keep it to 1 page. Please, just 1 page. Really, for an MBA application, it just needs to be 1 page. Don't put in an objective or anything else at the top. Like, hey, my objective is to get the MBA program. Like, that's obvious. You're applying. You want to start with your education at top and work your way down to the military experience. If you kind of had a more traditional undergraduate experience, right, and you participated in clubs or sports or, whatever, list that. If you have a GMAT above 700, list that. If you have a GPA that falls in the middle 80% range, list that. So you really want to like try and play to your strengths here. It'll be obvious, if like, if you don't have a good GMAT, you don't put it on there. It's obvious why. They'll figure it out. But if you have good GMAT, you should put it on there so they can just see it right away. So the next part of your application are going to be these essay questions. And they're going to ask you some questions about your career and goals in a short response format. And these are actually, they've really made them a lot shorter than they used to be. It used to be you'd have to write like a couple pages here. But now they've gone to, just like 250 to 500 words, sometimes less. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that schools don't like reading essays. It's a huge pain. And it favors professional essay crafters, some of these admissions consultants. And they also want to make it easier to apply. This is all about lowering the bar, right? And still kind of keeping what they view as acceptable ways of measuring people against each other. And so you'll kind of see permutations of the following here for your essays. It'll be like, talk about your career goals, which could be like, hey, I want to go get into an MBA program, then go be an investment banking associate or consultant doing M&A work, or I want to go do tech sales, or I want to go do product management for a tech firm, or I want to go work in an FP&A at an airline. All reasonable career goals, but important that you go and find out what those are, right? I mean, you don't have to be like super specific, but they should kind of align with what the school's known for, because all schools kind of have a brand. Why an MBA and why now? Well, I've kind of reached an inflection point in my career and I realized to take it to the next level, I need to get some more formal business education, and I'd like to take advantage of the school's recruiting and, strengths, et cetera, in order to get into X, Y, and Z job. That would be like a very generic example. What is your A and B jobs search plan while you're at school, right? So you'll have, what is your A and B job search plan while at school? And what this really means is MBA programs recognize that a lot of people come and they want to kind of shoot for the stars here, and that could be, I want to do consulting, I want to do investment banking, I want to get into maybe some high-powered tech job. But they also recognize that those are selective even within the schools, right? So say consulting doesn't work out. What are you going to do your second year, right? If you get a consulting internship and you'll get a return offer, what are you going to do your second year? Like, do you have a backup plan? And they want to see that you've put some thought into that. And that's that's a common question as well. Same thing with investment banking. But you should just think about it, right? It's a good way for you to kind of think about, well, hey, what if it doesn't work out? What if my first career, or I don't like it, right? I don't like it, which is a big benefit of an MBA program, is you get to kind of try on some different hats. So think about it, and talk with the Veterans Club, and talk with admissions, and talk with and look at the school, and see what careers they're kind of like geared towards. You'll have described leadership experience. usually they're looking for, hey, how did you resolve conflict, or, work cross-functionally with people who weren't, they want to see some sort of, leadership qualities other than just like direct authority. It's easy to tell people what to do. It's hard to influence people. When did you face a challenge? This kind of ties into the previous question. Why this school? You really should think carefully about this one, because they'll say like, hey, like if you're going to Columbia, you want to go to Columbia, for example, why Columbia? It's in New York City. It's an expensive school to go to. It's expensive to live there. But what you'd be trying to say is, I want to go to Columbia because I want to, recruit for banking, right? Or, there's fashion brands, or there's, some sort of industry that's aligned with what I'm doing. Um, same like trying to go to Wharton, so you need to have an understanding of what the school is kind of geared towards. And some are more general than others, or broader. How you contribute to the student body. MBA programs are immersive experiences, and they expect the students to really spend a lot of time together. And you will, right? They're 2-year programs, and these people you'll spend a ton of time with them. So, you have to, understand, hey, uh, I'm joining a community here. There's student clubs that are very important to career outcomes and also life at the school, and also within the classroom as well. So how am I going to contribute to this? How am I going to contribute to the student body here? And you could say, hey, I want to join these clubs. I want to do X, Y, trips. I want to take a leadership role. It would be that sort of it would be that sort of answer that you'd be looking for. Describe a time you failed. Nobody's perfect. People fail all the time. I screw up. So you need to be able to talk about how you failed, and what you learned from it, right? It's kind of the STAR format. So situation, task, action, result. And sometimes you'll see this as well, which I think is a little pretentious. And this is the why you question. And this is basically, hey, sell me on yourself, right? What makes you so unique that you should be admitted in here to a school that may have a selection rate of like 8%? So do your best on this, and you really speak from the heart. So the essay questions are important, right? They're important in the sense that after they get through your GMAT, and they kind of get through your resume, and they look at your GPA. They're really, this is your chance to really speak to the school. And if you make a compelling case, right, and you really tailor your applications to the school, these can really bolster your candidacy. So it's important to take them seriously. And the schools don't expect perfection, but they want somebody to have performed some level of due diligence on a $200K investment, which is kind of like the ballpark range for how much one of these schools cost. Minus for scholarships and GI Bill and everything. So like certain schools are known for certain career paths, like Columbia and Wharton they're really well known for finance. Harvard Business School is a big leadership school that pumps out, people to all sorts of different communities. Stanford is very tech focused, right? Because of their location, and, VCPE. Darden and Tucker Consulting Schools. Carnegie Mellon is known as a data analytics school. They all kind of have these different brands. You want to talk to the veterans at the school you're applying to. And almost all schools now have a veterans club, so make sure you're doing that. And let's kind of like briefly diverge here and say, hey, I want to talk to the veterans club here. How do I do that, right? So like it really is just as simple as Googling, like say like, hey, veterans club, HBS MBA, Harvard Business Veterans Club, which is, I think, one of the larger ones, simply because of how big Harvard is. Look, here's a General Mattis here. So, hey, it's immediately you're going to find something like current students. You're going to have all these smiling faces here who look, super motivated and going to crush it. Yeah, they have a lot of vets at HBS, but simply just because of the size of it. Prospective students, right? This is a great spot to head to. I don't know why it's not working. Oh, apply. Right? they're going to have all of this here. You know, they're not going to maybe get into too much detail, but what you can do is most of them have an admissions representative, like a direct point of contact, whose job it is to handle inbound or prospective candidates, and direct them to whoever is probably close related to their demographic. Financial aid. They'll talk about we'll talk about financial aid here. So but like this is not universal across all schools, right? Every veterans club is different. We'll take a look at mine here in a second. I used to run the Veterans Club, Carnegie Mellon, so I have some experience in talking about this. Some will host these military virtual visit weeks, right? And you'll get to come, pre-COVID, right? And after COVID is kind of subdued, it'll go back to this, where you can come and you'll go to the school, or you'll have some sort of webinar or whatever. You can go meet prospective students. It's important to note that these are not like make or break events. Like if you go to the HBS like invite day or whatever, like or virtual day, you're not. It isn't like doesn't mean you're getting to HBS. Like it's just for you to learn more about the school. And sometimes I see misconceptions among applicants about that. So important to interact though. If you're trying to get more educated on it. Let's see. And who the hell keeps all their uniforms there at business school? Sponsorship. Some of these schools are sponsored by companies, right? Or some of these clubs, right? And they'll say like, hey, we're going to give you some money for you to do events, right? And you plug us because we're always looking for people. Alumni. But like I said, your mileage is going to vary at different business schools. Like let's take a look at Tepper MBA Veterans Club, right? So this is Tepper's. It's changed quite a bit from when I ran it. It used to look a lot different. I like what they've done here. Very bright. It's more HBS-y. Though I did put this picture in here, and I did paint this fence. So like you can kind of see like the different like sponsors, and everything. Current student profiles. So all good stuff to be aware of, right? Like if you wanted to talk about admissions with a veterans club, you would contact this dude, the VP of admissions. So let's see here. I wonder what let's look at a real McCombs. Can't spell McCombs right. McCombs MBA Veterans Club. Interesting. Yeah, so yeah, and anyway, this stuff is easily searchable, and you can find people very quickly. And I think that's an important thing. Googling can go a long way, and just exploring the schools at admissions website. Yeah, so make sure you have a decent understanding on what a typical MBA career path looks like, the sort of roles and positions that companies look to hire out of MBA programs. Somewhat standardized, right? The changes as jobs kind of evolve and everything. But you look at it and it's really going to be more about, hey, consulting and finance are huge, are huge, and large numbers of people get hired into those jobs at MBA programs. Marketing jobs, operations jobs, is different than what you'd think of operations in the military. All roles that you could be expected to perform or to have a chance to apply to. So let's see. Yeah. A lot of schools are going to require an application fee. Some schools will waive it for military, which is great. It really allows you to kind of spread your applications a little further. Usually about $150 to $250, which is a semi-painful amount. So, make sure you're putting in as much thought so you don't have to do this more than once. Yeah, so, as far as how long it takes this to do, it can take about, say you're doing 3 to 4 MBA applications, it's going to take you a while. It'll take you a few months to do, at least to do them, right? So, this isn't something you can kind of put off. So, let's talk about admission cycles here real quick. So let's do, let's go to the standby HBS MBA, and we'll also go do Tepper, which is my alumni here. So HBS, right? MBA Harvard Business School. Go to Tepper as well. So let's take a look at the, so you're at this cool looking, yeah. Download the brochure. Sure. You see this really cool splashy page, right? And they're going to be they're going to be giving you all sorts of metrics here and like what it's like. If you kind of know what you're doing, you can kind of skip all this. What you really want to go to is the admissions page. It's the most important page. And so talk about, hey, who they're kind of looking for, right? Which all business schools are kind of looking for this: leadership, analytical aptitude, appetite, engaged community citizenship. And they'll say, hey, we have a 3-step admissions process. First step is submit your written application, and they're going to want to interview you, and then they'll make a decision, admissions decision. So let's go here. Where is application deadlines? Let's go to the applications process. Actually, it's the 2 to 2. Which cares about this? Let's see. I am getting a little lost in here. So let's see. We'll just do this. HBS MBA application deadlines. Application dates. Okay. Don't see why that was so difficult to find. So the admissions, an MBA admissions cycle is about a year long. And so the applications generally open up in the May of the year before you want to go, right? So say it's right now, it's 2021, and you want to go to school in 2022. The 2020, the admission cycles for students who are going to matriculate this fall is already ongoing, and we're probably, March here, so we're probably inching into round 3 applications. The admission cycle for the next year will start in the summer. So around the May-June timeline, applications will open up, and you will then have to begin your application, right? And the application you kind of have from like May to whatever the application deadline is here, and it's separated into rounds. So for HBS round 1, which is the first round, the round you should apply to if you want to try and get the most scholarship money, you need to have it submitted by the 8th of September, right? So you kind of have like May to September to do your whole application. Now that's just to like, write your essays and get all your stuff in. You can do the GMAT like way before that. The GMAT's good for 5 years, and you should, right? Before you really start this process, you should have a good GMAT score. Though you'll hear stories of people winging it all the time. So, you're going to have your application in for HBS by the 8th of September. And then you're going to wait. And what's going to happen is HBS is then going to reach out and start sending out interview invites. And these interview invites are extremely important. because they are going to basically say, hey, you know, if you get an interview invite, your chances of getting admitted are obviously much higher. If you don't, you know, you're probably going to get either waitlisted or outright rejected, probably closer to this outright rejected. And so they'll send out these interview invites, and they'll sometimes, you know, they'll kind of like piecemeal them out, or they'll do a big batch all at once, you know, whatever. And then you'll do the interview. We can talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then once you're done with the interview, you're going to wait for the admissions board decision, which usually comes around, you know, sometime for round one, sometime in early December. And Harvard Business School is usually like the earliest one to like open their their MBA application. Let's take a look at Tepper, right? Tepper. MBA program. Oh, let's just go to admissions. Similar hopeful looking page. Yeah, so see this online application form, current resume, run one required essay. They've gotten it down. Professional recommendation, unofficial transcripts of all academic work, official GMAT, GRE, or EA score. The TOEFL is for people who are non-native English speakers, and then a $200 application fee. And then important dates and deadlines. So for Tepper, you see, HBS is much earlier, right? September. Tepper's is a full month later, so October. And then they send their decisions out a day before HBS. Interesting. And then you have to put down your deposits. So the difference between rounds, right? So round one is where most of the scholarship money is going to be, but you can still get scholarship money in the other rounds. Your chances are greater in round one because they're filling out the kind of bulk of the class then. So, you know, my advice is you always want to, the number one goal of applying to one of these programs is to just get in, right? And the scholarship money is kind of secondary. So depending on your situation, you should always apply when your application is at its best. And if you have to miss around, that's fine. You know, it's not going to doom you and screw you out of scholarship money. But, you know, you should be aware that the chances are greater in round one. But like I said, at the end of the day, you just need to get in. So, you know, pick the round appropriately for sure. And schools don't like look negatively. And like if you apply in like round 4 versus round 1, like they're not going to like hold that against you. I mean, they have the round open for you to apply. But just, you know, take that into consideration. Some schools do early decisions. I think Columbia does early decision, but most of them don't do rolling applications. They have like specified rounds for you to apply in, and that's really important to note. Something else to note is you can't start an MBA somewhere and then transfer to another school. It's kind of like you go there and you just do it. Yeah, so you know you do all this right, and you wait until an interview is requested. And, you know, I talked about, hey, if you get an interview invite, very positive step. If you don't, you know, probably going to get denied. Interviews are interesting experiences. You know, I would say it's important for you to go to the school, you know, and interview in person, but it's also not entirely necessary. You know, so it's changed, right? Schools, you know, are kind of going on the route as we just want as many people as possible to apply, so we can be as selective and broaden our applicant pools as possible. But, you know, if you haven't visited the school and you really want to make your enthusiasm known to the MBA program, it probably is in your best interest to go and say that to them face to face. So you go there and, you know, you check out the school, get to talk with students, interact with people at the Veterans Club. You know, don't be weird, you know, come off as normal, and they'll like you. And in the interview, you know, itself, right? Like, just be very like, I really want to go to this school. And, you know, in the interview, they're going to basically kind of ask you like essay questions, but in real life. And the first one is going to be walk me through your resume. And you're going to kind of give an overview of your career progression and stuff you like to do outside of your career. You know, and then they're going to talk about like This one's a great one. Give an example of a time you failed. So it could be like, why do you want to study an MBA and why now? Very common question. And here's some of the answers. Personal interests aligns with the career goals, increasing professional network, starting a business, moving towards senior leadership. Perfectly acceptable. Why this school? International reputation, links to businesses. You could even list specific courses like, hey, like I'm really interested in data analytics, and you guys have a great data analytics professor program. Give an example of a time you failed. So always use the STAR format here. So situation, task, action, result, which generally results in like you learning stuff, right? Because in the business world, if you screw something up, it's experience, right? People have to learn from mistakes. Most stuff isn't career ending, though there are consequences. Long-term goals, ambitious but not delusional. Yeah, I think that's a good description. You want to be, hey, I have hunger and I have drive, but I know it's a tough road. That'd be a good way to describe that. Clearly considered and well matched to an MBA program. Tell me about what you've achieved as a leader. Influencing without authority is like, it's such a big one, right? Because, in the business world, people can just leave your company. They don't have to fucking hang around. It's be like, now I'm done with this, right? And so you have to really be able to influence people without just being a jerk. You don't want to talk about, working alone, because business schools want to see dynamic, vibrant leaders who are able to take initiative and get stuff done, because that's who recruits well for the jobs or the firms that come to hire from these schools. Yes, that's a pretty good overview. Yeah, and like admissions decisions. So, well, what's going to happen is you're going to like get to this date where the admissions decisions are going to be released, and all the schools do it a little differently. Some schools will call you and say, "Hey, you're getting in with X amount of money." Sweet. Other schools, they'll just like send out a bunch of emails, right? And you'll get like an email and it'll be like, "Hey, your admissions decision is ready," which is, it's always very nerve-wracking experience to open this thing, because one of three things are going to happen: you're going to get admitted, you're going to get waitlisted, or you're going to get denied. And they don't really send physical packets anymore to like tell you. It's almost always an email. And hopefully you open it, and it'll have like it'll have like a little line that like, view your admissions decision, and you click on it, and it's like, you get to see what the admissions decision is. It's very nerve-wracking. And if you get admitted, they're going to have some stuff in there, right? There could be like, hey, you've been admitted to this program, and we're going to give you X amount of scholarship money or no money at all. And there might be some provisional conditions of your admission. Hey, you need to complete like a calculus course, right? Because you have to remember, a lot of people go to these programs that don't have a lot of math background, right? And the GMAT is very simple math, relatively. So it's not like, you're going to be proving to them that you can do calculus, right? And, so the schools may want to take some like, math courses that they'll like tee up for you at like a very minimal cost. If you get declined admission, it sucks. Just is what it is. Hopefully you applied to enough schools to get admitted somewhere else, or try again next year. You can't apply in another round. Like it's once per admission cycle. Waitlisted, waitlisted is an interesting purgatory, because the school thinks you're qualified, right? But maybe they just want to see something more, or they they're filling out the class, and they may be waiting for a spot to open up. The craziest waitlist story I've ever heard is I knew a guy who's a former another military guy, and he was applying to all these schools in the US. He didn't get in. He got into an Australian MBA program, so it's like, I'm going to go do that. It's going to be awesome. He got waitlisted at Wharton, so he goes to Australia, and he's hanging out there, He's getting ready to start his program. And like Wharton called him, like, hey, you're off the wait list. He's like, okay, dumped all his stuff, flew back to the US, went to Wharton. It was a easy decision for him. I've had other people, right? They've been waitlisted when I was at Carnegie Mellon. I was running the Veterans Club at the time, and they would, they'd reach out to me, and this is why it's important to reach out to the Veterans Club, and to, we talk with them, and see, hey, I really think this person's got something the admissions committee isn't seeing, and you go and kind of make a personal plea to the admissions committee and write some letters, and both of them got in, which is great. So it's important to know that the wait list isn't like the end of it. You just really need to talk to the admissions committee and see what they're looking for. They may tell you like, hey, retake the GMAT. It's probably the biggest one right there. Something else to know as well, there's a lot of documentation around like application deadlines and everything. So you could say MBA application deadlines. Boom. Probably the first thing that's going to come up is Poets and Quants, which it did. And Poets and Quants is a very well-known MBA blog. Isn't even the right word. It's it's a very commercial activity. And though they do a far better job of keeping track of all this stuff than I ever could, because I have a full-time job. And they'll say, hey, here's the 2020, 2021 MBA application deadlines. And they'll some of it's always a little hyperbole. You got to take this stuff with a grain of salt. Predicting that quality and quantity are about to be redefined. Yeah, just like it's redefined every year. You'll see some of the same stuff I say. Apply as early as you can, but not until you've done the best job possible. And then they'll list out all the application deadlines here. So this stuff is well documented, easy to find. You just have to do some Googling. Yeah. So, and they'll have the round 2 ones here. You can also check out GMAT Club. There'll be like these informal blogs. Let's do this with GMAT Club. And you could like, okay, I want to see everybody's applying to Ross. Go to Ross here. Oh wait. Sorry, that actually took me to the real school. GMAT partners. It's in here. They'll have these forums on these websites, right, where you can like almost in real time talk to other applicants, which is really more helpful as admissions decisions are coming up, or interviews, right? Because you want to see when interviews are getting metered out, and like say you haven't heard in like a few weeks, you want to see like, is there still hope? So, but don't go crazy on these things. So yeah, that's pretty much it, I think, for this blog. MBA admissions is always tough. It's never easy. It's nerve-wracking. It's not fun. It's exciting though, at the very minimum, because you're really kind of taking a step in, the next step in your career. I think maybe the one thing I will touch on is, depending on how strong of an applicant you are, you should, I think, always try to apply to some different tiers of MBA programs, right? Because just to say I'm going to apply to like every, all of the top 20 schools is like incredibly mentally exhausting, and you'd have a hard time convincing your recommenders to do that. So you may say, hey, I'm going to apply to like 2 or 3 schools in the top, the M7, 2 to 3 schools, in the 10 to 15 range, or 10 to 20 range, and maybe a couple in the 20 to 25 range, just to make sure I have some safety schools. And that's more doable, right? But like, you don't want to apply, like, it's not possible to apply to every school. You'd go crazy, and you wouldn't do a very good job in your applications either. So just know it's kind of like it's very, it can almost be random how you get in, like, it's way to feel like, and it's very competitive. But if you have a good GMAT score, and especially you come from a military background, there's a likely chance you'll get into at least one place. So, all right. Well, that is it for this video. So, I appreciate if you liked it, commented, subscribed. I'm going to continue to build on more videos like this and integrate them into the webpage. Positive reactions from it, definitely. And I appreciate everybody's time, and have a great rest of your day.